Here's a frustrating reality of today's job market. This has likely probably happened to you. It's unfortunate, but it's true. You apply to a role, you interview for it, you even maybe speak to the hiring manager, and then guess what? The company ghosts you. You never hear back, you never hear feedback, whether or not you're moving forward, or even if you're rejected for the role, you just never hear back. This has been on the rise lately, and there are a few reasons behind it. Let me give you some insight. If you're new to my channel, my name's Patrick. This is Patrick Recruiter. I have nearly a decade of experience taking small companies from just a handful of employees to hundreds of employees globally. I've been in that recruiter seat so I can give you interesting perspective into why companies are ghosting you, especially in today's job market. Let's dive into it. So why do companies ghost candidates? There are a few different reasons. The first reality is that in today's job market, there are a ton of applicants applying to jobs. We're talking hundreds, if not thousands of applicants applying to jobs within the tech sector specifically. And that's not dependent on what department. That could be in marketing, that could be in sales, that could be in engineering, that could be in the recruiting and HR people team. Thousands of candidates are out there on the market and they're applying to jobs. And simply, those internal teams that work at those companies are just inundated with applicants. They can't handle the load. The volume is too much. They can't actually look at every single resume and expect to respond with a yes or no. With that being said, ATS systems, those are those applicant tracking systems that capture all the information regarding the candidate's application, do have some automation features in it that make it pretty simple to auto-reject candidates and schedule emails out. So while we think companies can actually do this because the tools allow them to reach out to every candidate that applies to a role via the automated system that's housed within the applicant tracking system, that simply doesn't happen because the company doesn't have enough recruiters on hand to actually handle the inbound resumes that they are receiving. With that being said, let's be realistic just as a job hunter. For every application that you submit, do you honestly feel like you're gonna get some type of response outside of the automatic response that you get from those applicant tracking systems? What a lot of companies are doing now is that they are writing in those email replies that, hey, the volume of the resumes are increasing. Basically, we can't handle it all. So only expect to hear back from us if we are moving forward with you to the next round, which would be like an initial phone call or a video interview with the recruiter or the hiring manager. From a candidate's perspective, let's be realistic. If you apply to a role, it's likely you won't hear back unless the company wants to move forward. There's too many applicants. I know it sucks not to hear back after you spent the time applying to a role, especially given how complex some of these job applications are. But honestly, that's become pretty common these days. What's more frustrating is when you actually get to an interview and you speak to a recruiter or a hiring manager and then you get ghosted. What a lot of people don't realize is internal hires or promotions are a great thing for companies. A lot of times when a role is posted, sometimes there might be somebody internally that wants to move into that position or even get promoted into that role. So a lot of times what will happen, those internal candidates are going to get priority treatment. Why? Because the company already knows them. They know their work habits. They're already contributing to the company, and it looks good for the company to promote internally or let their employees move around within the company into different teams that set them up for success, because it's like a win-win. That internal employee moves to a different team, they get the job that they really want, the company looks good because they're moving people around, they allow fluidity within their company, and it allows them to say, hey, we let our team members really move around here, and it really showcases a culture of growth. But what that means for that external candidate is that, unfortunately, the role that you just applied for, and maybe even interviewed for, got filled internally, and that's why you might never hear back. The role got filled, and the recruiter unfortunately did not close the gap to let you know that there was an internal promotion. The role is no longer open. That could be another reason why you spent time speaking to a recruiter or a hiring manager or even interviewed with the team, and then unfortunately you were ghosted because somebody internal was promoted or interviewed for the role and was hired. Where a lot of ghosting happens from companies to candidates comes from a lack of communication. Recruiters have a lot on their plates, especially right now when these recruitment teams are pretty much razor thin. They're juggling maybe 10, 15 different roles at any given time. They're working across a variety of different hiring managers. they're handling all the inbound applicants, they're handling the referrals, their internal applicants that are applying to the role. There are a lot on their plate. They have to handle the scheduling, the coordination, the actual closing of the candidate. Not saying those are all excuses, but this is the reality of what's going on with internal recruitment teams right now, that they don't have the bandwidth. And sometimes the recruiter or the hiring manager just simply forgets that you were in the process. They had that initial phone call or they had that hiring manager interview, and that's it. They spoke to 10 other candidates and they forgot you in the process, and you never heard back that you weren't moving forward. That's likely due because they're handling multiple candidates, and chances are there was another candidate that maybe impressed a little bit better, so they moved that candidate forward in the process faster, which left you behind and unfortunately forgotten. Another reason why a company might ghost you after an interview, the recruiter or potentially the hiring manager fails in wanting to deliver you bad news. Nobody likes to deliver the news that you are not moving forward in the process, or that you did poorly in this area of the interview. Delivering bad news is difficult, and it's something that people need to work on and definitely need to improve their skills on during the process. But this shouldn't be a reason why companies don't get back to you, but unfortunately, this is a reason why companies sometimes don't get back to the candidates that they interview. They don't know how to deliver the news that the candidate did not perform well, that the candidate did not meet the expectations, especially if that candidate made it through several rounds of interviews. Imagine getting through 2 or 3 rounds, maybe even close to a final round, and then having to deliver that candidate information that, hey, unfortunately, you did not get selected for this role. We decided to move forward with somebody else. Here are the reasons why. It's unfortunate that recruiters or hiring managers don't have the skills to deliver bad news, but I find that transparency is the only way to go. It's better to be super direct, to let the candidate know, here's how it went. Here's where you did well, here's where you didn't do that well, and here's the reason why we're not moving forward in the process, versus just straight up ghosting the candidate. But this is another reason why companies are ghosting candidates, because they don't have the skills or the ability to deliver the bad news that the candidate wasn't a great fit for the role. Especially in today's market where you have a ton of job seekers out there desperately looking for that next role. A company will ghost you, and one of the probably more common ones these days, or that the role just gets eliminated. Chances are there might be a role that was open. The company had all this intention of actually hiring somebody and wanting to fill the position, and then all of a sudden the end of the month comes, let's say it's the end of the quarter, and they don't have the budget anymore to actually fill that position. So what do? They just take the job off and forget about all the candidates that applied or were interviewed for the role. They don't close the loop. This does happen, it is pretty frequent, and if you are in this situation and you're working as a recruiter, definitely be more transparent and let the candidates know that you interviewed. This job was closed due to budget constraints, unfortunately, but we're hoping to open it up, next quarter when we have a better idea where we are from a hiring standpoint. And then finally, maybe it was just a ghost role to begin with. The job wasn't actually real. That does happen. If you want to learn more about ghost jobs, those are those roles that companies post. They don't have any actual intention of filling right now. I'll link that later. So there you have it. Whether it's candidate volume that applies to the role, internal communication issues that don't allow recruiters or hiring managers to get back to candidates, internal promotions or hires, budget constraints or strategy changes within the company, or it's just straight up a ghost job. Those are the reasons why companies, unfortunately, are not getting back to you after you interview for the role, meaning you've been ghosted. So what do you do if you feel like you've been ghosted by the company? Let's say you spoke to the recruiter, the hiring manager, or maybe even interviewed with the team, and you have yet to hear back, and you're feeling like, I've been ghosted. Here's my recommendation. Set up a calendar reminder for 2 to 3 days after your interview. In case you haven't heard back, drop a line to the recruiter that you're working with or the hiring manager that you interviewed with. Chances are you already have their contact information. So you can simply drop them a note. Hey recruiter, I really enjoyed meeting X manager the other day. Was wondering what the feedback was, looking forward to the next steps. What does the timeline look like? This will bring your name back to the top of the list. In case you had been forgotten, the recruiter will hopefully get back to you quickly with feedback. Separately, I think always a good thing to do after you interviewed with a hiring manager, drop them a LinkedIn connection like the next day or so. That way, again, you pop up in their minds like, oh, I just spoke to so-and-so. Oh, they showed extra interest. They're connecting with the team, they're connecting with the hiring managers, whoever they're interviewing with. I think that's super important because you're trying to establish relationships with these people that you're interviewing with. It makes you interesting because you're showing interest in the role and the company. If you drop a follow-up in 2 to 3 days after your interview and you have yet to hear back in another 1 to 2 days, try one more time. After that, chances are you just weren't the right fit. And unfortunately, the company just dropped the ball and they're not gonna respond and leaving you feel in this ghosted situation. If you found this video helpful, you might like my other video on ghost jobs, which are those fake job postings that companies post that make their companies look like they're hiring, but they're not actually intending on filling that position right now. Like, subscribe, and follow along for more career interviewing and recruiting insights.